James Carter sat at his desk, the Chicago skyline sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, glinting off a framed photo of his teenage daughter, Lily, laughing at a county fair. The image was a reminder of why he worked so hard to build something lasting, something he could be proud to pass on. But today, that pride felt hollow. A stack of customer complaints, printed out and dog-eared, loomed on his desk like an accusation. Long wait times, rude staff, cold food, locations falling apart. The words blurred together, each one a pinprick. To his conscience, 8 years ago, James had bought Sunshine Burgers, a struggling fast food chain on the brink of bankruptcy. At 37, he'd been a young, ambitious entrepreneur with a vision to turn it into a place where quality food met, a workplace that valued its people. He'd grown up flipping burgers in a greasy diner, watching his mother work double shifts to keep their family afloat. He knew the grind, the exhaustion, the quiet dignity of those who showed up every day. Sunshine Burgers was supposed to be different, a chain that didn't just serve customers but uplifted its employees. For a while, it had worked. Profits climbed, locations expanded, and James felt like he was building a legacy. But lately, something was rotting at the core. He picked up the top complaint, an email from a woman named Linda Harris, a regular at the Oakwood location. "I've been coming to Sunshine Burgers for years, but it's unrecognizable now. The staff look miserable, the place is a mess, and I waited 25 minutes for a burger. What happened to the place I loved?" James's jaw tightened. What had happened? He'd asked himself that question too many times over the past 6 months. Every time he pressed his district manager, Michael Hayes, for answers, he got the same polished response: "We're handling it, James. Just a rough patch." But rough patches didn't last this long, and they didn't spawn a flood of complaints across 6 locations in the Midwest. James leaned back in his leather chair, rubbing his temples. Michael had been with the company since the early days, a smooth-talking operator who always hit his numbers. James had trusted him to oversee the day-to-day operations while he focused on strategy, expansion, and investor meetings. Maybe that was the problem. He'd become too removed, too reliant on reports and assurances. The last time he'd stepped into a Sunshine Burgers kitchen was 3 years ago, during a photo op for a local news segment. He'd worn a crisp suit, shaken hands, and left after an hour. The memory stung now, how distant he'd felt. Even then, his eyes drifted to a faded Polaroid tucked into the corner of the photo frame. A younger James, 19, in a stained apron, grinning beside his mother in the diner where they'd worked. She'd taught him the value of showing up, of treating every employee like they mattered. "People are the heart of any business, Jimmy," she'd said. "Forget that, and you've got nothing." He hadn't forgotten, not really, but somewhere along the way, he'd let that truth slip through his fingers. Enough was enough. James couldn't keep sitting here, sifting through complaints while his company unraveled. He needed to see the truth for himself, not through Michael's filtered reports, but with his own eyes. An idea sparked, audacious and risky. What if he went back to the front lines? Not as James Carter, CEO, but as an ordinary employee, a trainee, invisible to the managers and staff. He could work the counters, scrub the floors, and hear what people said when they thought no one important was listening. It was the only way to know what was really happening. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. It wouldn't be easy. At 45, he wasn't exactly inconspicuous. His face had appeared in trade magazines, company newsletters, even a local TV interview last year. But Sunshine Burgers had over 2,000 employees across the Midwest. Most had never met him in person. With a few changes, grow out his stubble, swap his tailored suits for jeans, maybe wear glasses he could pass as someone else. Jimmy, he thought, a nod to his younger self. That's who he be. James pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Claire, a sharp woman who'd been with him for a decade. Claire, I need you to do something for me, he said, keeping his voice low. And it stays between us. Always does, boss, she replied, her tone curious but professional. I'm going undercover at the Oakwood location next week. As a new trainee, name's Jimmy. Set it up with HR, but don't let Michael or anyone else know. Tell them it's a special training program, whatever you need to say. There was a pause on the line. Undercover? Like reality TV undercover? James chuckled despite himself. No cameras. Just me. I need to know what's going on, Claire. The complaints are piling up, and I'm not getting straight answers. Got it, she said, her voice shifting to business mode. I'll make it happen. But James, you sure about this? It's not exactly CEO protocol. That's why I'm doing it, he said. Protocol's not working. By Monday morning, James stood in front of the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers, a nondescript building, on a busy strip mall. He barely recognized himself in the reflection of the glass door. Faded jeans, a plain black t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled low, and thick-rimmed glasses he'd bought at a drugstore. His stubble had grown into a scruffy beard, and he'd ditched his usual cologne for the faint scent of cheap soap. In his hand was a crumpled job application Claire had mocked up, listing Jimmy Larson as a 40-something drifter with spotty work experience. His heart pounded not with fear, but with anticipation. For the first time in years, he felt like he was taking control. The Oakwood location had the worst complaints. 45-minute wait times, staff shortages, and a 1-star Yelp review that called it a dumpster fire with fries. If the rot was anywhere, it was here. James took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The smell hit him first grease, burnt coffee, and something faintly sour. The dining area was half empty, but the counter was chaos. A single cashier juggling orders while customers tapped their feet. Behind the grill, a lone worker flipped burgers at a frantic pace. The air buzzed with tension, like a string about to snap taut. A man in a manager's polo, his name tag reading Ryan, glanced up from the register. His eyes were bloodshot, his face etched with exhaustion. You Jimmy? He asked, barely pausing. Yeah, James said, keeping his voice neutral. First day. Ryan sighed, already turning back to the screen. Greg, we're slammed, so no time for hand-holding. Follow me, don't screw up, and try to keep up. James nodded, slipping into the role of Jimmy Larson. But as he stepped behind the counter, his CEO instincts kicked in, cataloging every detail. The sticky floor, the flickering fluorescent light, the stack of unwashed trays. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was a breakdown. And he was about to find out why. As he trailed Ryan into the kitchen, James felt the weight of the moment settle over him. He wasn't here to play pretend. He was here to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly. What he didn't know yet was just how deep the problems ran or how much it would cost him to fix them. James Carter, now Jimmy Larson, stepped into the kitchen of the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers, and the chaos hit him like a wave. The air was thick with the hiss of sizzling grease, the shrill beep of timers, and the clatter of metal spatulas against the grill. A fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow on the sticky, grease-streaked floor. The heat was oppressive, the ventilation system rattling uselessly above. James's first thought was that this wasn't a kitchen, it was a pressure cooker, and everyone inside was on the verge of breaking. Ryan Bennett, the shift manager, shoved a crumpled apron into James's hands. Put this on and stay out of the way until I tell you otherwise, he said, his voice clipped. Ryan's polo shirt was damp with sweat, his eyes sunken from exhaustion. He couldn't have been older than 25, but he carried himself like someone twice his age, worn down by too many long shifts. "We're in the lunch rush, and we're already drowning. Don't make it worse." James nodded, slipping the apron over his head. He kept his expression neutral, but his CEO instincts were screaming. The kitchen was understaffed. Only 3 people were working, including Ryan. A teenage girl manned the fryer, her hands moving in a blur as she dunked baskets of fries into bubbling oil. A boy, barely 16, hustled between the grill and the prep station, flipping burgers with one hand while assembling orders with the other. The front counter had a line of customers snaking out the door, their impatience palpable even from the back. "Hey, new guy," Ryan snapped, pointing to a stack of overflowing trash bins. "Start there. Empty those, then clean the prep area. Move fast." James grabbed a trash bag, his mind racing. He'd expected problems, but not this. The Oakwood location was one of Sunshine Burger's busiest, yet it was running on a skeleton crew. As he hauled the trash to the dumpster out back, the sour stench of rotting food hit him, and he noticed overflowing bins hadn't been emptied in days. The alley was littered with stray wrappers and cigarette butts, a far cry from the clean, welcoming image he'd envisioned for his chain. Back inside, James got his first good look at the teenage workers. The girl at the fryer wore a name tag reading Sarah Thompson. She was 18, maybe 19, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail and sweat beading on her forehead. Her hands trembled slightly as she scooped fries, her eyes darting to the order screen every few seconds. She looked like she hadn't taken a breath in hours. The boy at the grill was Ethan Miller, a lanky 16-year-old with a tense jaw and shadows under his eyes. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this too long, but his shoulders slumped with fatigue. "Sarah, where's order?" 47? Ryan barked from the counter, his voice cutting through the kitchen noise. "We've got people waiting. I'm trying." Sarah's voice cracked, strained with panic. She fumbled with a basket of fries, spilling some onto the counter. "The fryer's acting up again. It's too slow." "Then fix it," Ryan shot back. "We don't have time for excuses." James watched, his stomach tightening. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment as she scrambled to redo the order. Ethan glanced over, his expression hardening, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he flipped another burger, his movements mechanical. James recognized that look: resignation, the kind that came from being pushed too far. Too often. As he wiped down the prep area, James overheard Ethan muttering to Sarah, "This is bullshit. I've been here since 6 a.m. No break, no food, nothing. I'm supposed to be in school tomorrow." Sarah didn't look up, her hands still moving. "Tell me about it. I asked for a 5-minute break last shift, and Ryan acted like I was stealing from the register." James's grip on the rag tightened. A 16-year-old working since 6 a.m. without a break? That wasn't just bad management, it was illegal. He forced himself to stay in character, but the urge to intervene was overwhelming. He needed more evidence. Needed to see how deep this went. The front counter grew louder as a customer, a middle-aged man in a suit, slammed his hand on the counter. 20 minutes for a burger? This is ridiculous. "Where's the manager?" Ryan hustled over, his tone shifting to a strained politeness. "I'm the manager, sir. We're short-staffed today. I'll get your order out soon." "Short-staffed every day, you mean?" the man snapped. "This place is a joke." James watched Ryan's shoulders tense, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned back to the kitchen, his frustration boiling over. "Ethan, pick up the pace. We're getting killed out here." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm going as fast as I can, man. There's only one of me." "Then figure it out," Ryan said, his voice sharp. "Unless you want to explain to Stephen why we're behind." The name Stephen caught James's attention. He glanced at the back office, where a man in a manager's uniform emerged. his posture stiff and his expression unreadable. His name tag read Stephen Brooks, district manager. Stephen was in his late 30s, with a slick-back haircut and cold, assessing eyes. He surveyed the chaos like a general inspecting a losing battlefield, his lips pressed into a thin line. "What's going on out here?" Stephen's voice was low, but carried an edge that silenced the kitchen. Ryan stiffened, and even Sarah paused, her hands hovering over the fryer. "We're slammed." "Stephen," Ryan said, his tone defensive. "I told you we needed more people, but you said labor costs are too high." Stephen cut him off, his voice flat. "You make do with what you have. That's your job." Ethan, wiping sweat from his brow, spoke up, his voice sharp with frustration. "So we just work until we drop? I haven't eaten since last night, and I'm stuck here. Till close." Stephen's gaze flicked to him, unblinking. "You're on the clock, Ethan. If you can't handle it, no one's forcing you to stay." Sarah's eyes widened, and she shot Ethan a look, silently pleading with him to stop. Ethan's hands curled into fists, but he turned back to the grill, his silence louder than any retort. James felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't just a bad day. This was a system designed to grind people down. Stephen wasn't managing. He was ruling through fear. As James swept the floor, he pieced together the dynamics. Ryan, overworked and under pressure, was lashing out at the staff. Sarah and Ethan were stretched to their breaking points with no support. And Stephen, the district manager, was the architect of it all, enforcing cuts that left the restaurant and its people barely functioning. James's mind flashed to Michael Hayes, who'd assured him everything was fine. Either Michael was clueless or he was complicit. Neither option sat well. The lunch rush intensified, orders piling up on the screen. A woman at the counter shouted, "This is the third time my order's wrong. Do you people even care?" Sarah flinched, her hands shaking as she dumped another batch of fries. Ethan muttered under his breath, "Care? I don't even have time to think." James stepped closer to Ethan, keeping his voice low. "You really haven't had a break since 6? Ethan glanced at him, surprised someone was listening. "Nah, asked Ryan, but he said we're too busy. Stephen's on my case about hours too. I need this job, man. My mom's got medical bills, and..." He trailed off, shaking his head. James's chest tightened. Ethan was just a kid, carrying burdens no teenager should. He wanted to tell him it would be okay, that he'd fix this, but Jimmy Larson couldn't make those promises. Not yet. Tension snapped when Sarah dropped a tray of buns, the plastic clattering to the floor. Ryan spun around, his patience gone. "Sarah, what the hell?" "You're killing us here. I'm sorry." Sarah's voice broke, her eyes glistening. "I'm doing my best, Ryan, I swear." "Your best isn't good enough," Stephen said, stepping forward. His tone was calm, but it carried a venom that made James's blood boil. "If you can't keep up, maybe this isn't the job for you." Sarah froze, her hands trembling. Ethan shot Stephen a glare but stayed silent, his fist still clenched. James felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. He couldn't blow his cover, not yet, but every fiber of his being screamed to intervene. This wasn't just a failing restaurant. It was a toxic system, and it was happening under his watch. As the rush continued, James kept moving, absorbing every detail. The broken fryer that slowed orders, the single working sink overflowing with dishes, the way Sarah and Ethan braced themselves every time Stephen spoke. He knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a one-day problem. It was a pattern, and he needed to see it through to the end. By the time the lunch rush ebbed, the kitchen was a wreck, and the staff looked like they'd run a marathon. Ryan slumped against the counter, rubbing his temples. Sarah leaned over the fryer, her breath uneven. Ethan stared at the clock, counting the minutes until his shift ended or until he collapsed, whichever came first. James swept the last of the debris into a dustpan, his mind made up. He'd come here to observe, but what he'd seen was worse than he'd imagined. Tomorrow, he'd dig deeper. He needed to know how far this went and who was truly responsible. The kitchen of the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers was a battlefield, and the lunch rush had left its soldiers battered. James Carter, still playing the role of Jimmy Larson, wiped down a prep counter, his hands moving mechanically while his mind cataloged the chaos around him. The fryer hissed erratically, its temperature gauge broken, forcing Sarah Thompson to guess when the fries were done. Ethan Miller, the 16-year-old at the grill, flipped burgers with a grim determination, his face slick with sweat. Ryan Bennett, the shift manager, darted between the counter and the kitchen, his voice hoarse from barking orders. The air was thick with grease and desperation, the kind that clung to your skin and sank into your bones. James had been on the job for 3 hours, and what he'd seen confirmed his worst fears. The restaurant wasn't just understaffed, it was being run into the ground. Sarah, barely 18, hadn't taken a break since her shift started at 8 a.m. Ethan, who'd been here since 6, looked like he was running on fumes, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. Ryan, stretched thin by the demands of District Manager Stephen Brooks, was unraveling, his frustration spilling onto the staff. And Stephen himself, with his cold, calculating demeanor, was the architect of this misery, enforcing cuts that violated labor laws and crushed morale. The front counter was a powder keg. A line of customers stretched to the door, their murmurs growing louder with each passing minute. A woman in a red coat tapped her foot, glaring at Ryan as he fumbled with the register. "This is absurd," she said, loud enough for the kitchen to hear. "I've been waiting 15 minutes for a kid's meal." "I'm sorry, ma'am," Ryan said, his tone strained. "We're doing our best." "Your best sucks," she snapped, drawing nods from others in line. James glanced at Sarah, who flinched at the outburst. Her hands shook as she dumped a basket of fries, some spilling onto the floor. "Sarah, come on," Ryan yelled, his patience gone. "We can't afford mistakes right now." "I'm trying, Ryan." Sarah's voice was raw, teetering on the edge of tears. She knelt to clean the spill, her movements frantic. James wanted to step in, to tell her it was okay, but he bit his tongue. Jimmy Larson didn't have that authority. Not yet. Ethan, flipping burgers, muttered under his breath. "This place is a nightmare. I'm done after today." "Don't start, Ethan," Ryan warned, his eyes darting to the back office where Stephen had retreated. "You know what happens if you mouth off." James's stomach churned. He'd overheard enough to know Stephen ruled through fear, threatening to cut hours or fire anyone who pushed back. Ethan, who needed this job to help his mother with medical bills, was trapped. Sarah, saving for college, was too scared to speak up. Ryan, caught between Stephen's demands and the staff's struggles, was lashing out to survive. This wasn't a team. It was a group of people pushed to their breaking points. The tension spiked when Stephen emerged from the office, his name tag glinting under the flickering lights. His presence silenced the kitchen like a predator stepping into a clearing. He scanned the chaos, his expression unreadable. "Ryan, why are we behind?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Ryan stiffened. "We're short-staffed, Stephen. I told you we needed at least 2 more people today. But you—" "Sud, labor costs," Stephen interrupted, his tone final. "You manage with what you have. That's why you're the shift manager." Ethan couldn't hold back. "Manage? We're dying out here. I haven't had a break in 9 hours, and I'm supposed to close tonight. That's not right." Stephen's eyes narrowed, locking onto Ethan. "You're on the clock, kid. If you need a break, clock out. But don't expect hours next week if you can't handle a rush." Sarah froze, her hands gripping the fryer basket. James saw the fear in her eyes, the way she shrank under Stephen's gaze. Ethan's fists clenched, his voice shaking with anger. "So I just work till I pass out? That's your plan?" Stephen stepped closer, his voice icy. "If you don't like it, there's the door. Plenty of kids would take your spot." James felt his fist tighten, his pulse pounding. This was it, the heart of the rod. Stephen wasn't just a bad manager. He was exploiting kids, breaking laws, and destroying the culture James had built. He couldn't stay silent any longer, but he needed one more push to break his cover. The spark came from the counter, where the woman in the red coat lost her patience. "This is unacceptable," she shouted, slamming her tray down. "My order's wrong, and I'm not waiting another 20 minutes. I want a refund, and I want it now." A man in a trucker jacket nearby chimed in, "Yeah, this place is a disaster. Where's the real manager?" Ryan rushed to the counter, his face flushed. "I'm a manager, sir. We'll fix this, I promise." "You better," the woman said, her voice rising, "or I'm never coming back." The commotion drew Stephen's attention, and he didn't move to help. Instead, he turned on Sarah, who was struggling to keep up with the fryer orders. "Sarah, what's the holdup? You're slowing us down the entire line." Sarah's voice. "Broke. The fryer's broken, Stephen. I'm doing everything I can." "Then do it faster," he snapped, "or you're out of a job." That was it. James felt something snap inside him. He'd seen enough more than enough. The exhaustion. In Sarah's eyes, the defiance in Ethan's clenched fists, the defeat in Ryan's slumped shoulders. This wasn't his company. Not anymore. But he was about to take it back. He stepped forward, dropping the rag he'd been holding. The kitchen noise faded, his focus narrowing. "Stephen," he said, his voice even but firm. "That's enough." Stephen turned, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you to talk to me like that? You're the new guy. Get back to work." James reached up, slowly removing his glasses. The cheap frames clattered onto the counter. He straightened, shedding the slouch he'd adopted as Jimmy Larson. The kitchen went quiet, the staff sensing something shift. Sarah paused, her hands still. Ethan glanced over, his brow furrowed. Ryan stared, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm not the new guy," James said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "I'm James Carter. I own Sunshine Burgers." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah's mouth parted, her eyes wide. Ethan let out a breathless laugh, as if he couldn't believe it. Ryan's face paled, his hands frozen on the register. Stephen blinked, his composure cracking for the first time. "What?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. James didn't waver. "I've spent the last 3 hours watching you run my restaurant into the ground. You've overworked these kids, violated labor laws, and created a toxic environment. You're done here, Stephen." Effective immediately. Stephen's face darkened, but he tried to recover. "You can't be serious. I was following orders. Michael. Hayes told me to cut costs. Michael's not here." James cut him off, his tone steel. "And even if he was, it wouldn't change a thing. You threatened a 16-year-old with losing hours for needing a break. You berated Sarah for equipment you refused to fix. You failed my employees and my customers. Pack your things and leave." The kitchen was silent, save for the faint sizzle of the grill. Stephen opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes darting to Ryan for support. Ryan looked away, his gaze fixed on the floor. Sarah's hands trembled, but she stood taller, as if a weight had lifted. Ethan crossed his arms, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Stephen straightened, his jaw tight. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low. He turned and stormed toward the office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed, but it didn't break the spell. James turned to the staff, his expression softening. "You shouldn't have to work like this. No one should." I'm here to fix it, starting now. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his skepticism intact. We've heard promises before, man. How's this different? James met his gaze. Because I saw it myself, and I'm not leaving until I make it right. Sarah swallowed, her voice barely. A whisper. What happens now? Now, James said, rolling up his sleeves, we get through this shift. Then we rebuild. A customer at the counter, an older woman with kind eyes, clapped softly. About time someone took charge, she said, her voice carrying. James recognized her from an earlier complaint email Linda Harris, the regular who'd loved sunshine burgers once. Her approval felt like a small victory, but he knew the real work was just beginning. As the staff returned to their stations, the air felt different, still tense, but with a flicker of possibility. James picked up a tray, ready to jump in. He'd come to observe, but now he was leading again. And he wasn't going to stop until every corner of his company reflected the values he'd built it on. The kitchen of the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers was quieter now, but the tension lingered like the smell of burnt grease. James Carter, no longer Jimmy Larson, stood in the center of the chaos he'd just upended. The staff, Sarah Thompson, Ethan Miller, and Ryan Bennett, exchanged wary glances, still processing the bombshell that their new trainee was the CEO. Stephen Brooks, the district manager who'd ruled with an iron fist, was gone, his office door still swinging from his abrupt exit. The fryer hissed, the grill sizzled, and the line of customers at the counter hadn't let up. But for the first time all day, there was a flicker of something new in the air, hope, fragile and untested. James rolled up his sleeves, his CEO polish replaced by the grit of his diner days. All right, he said, his voice steady but warm. Let's get through this shift. I'm not here to watch, I'm here to help. Sarah, still gripping the fryer basket, blinked at him. You're staying? Like, actually working? Damn right, James said, grabbing a tray to assemble orders. You've been carrying this place on your own. Not anymore. Ethan, leaning against the grill, raised an eyebrow. No offense, man, sir, but we've heard stuff like this before. Corporate types show up, make big promises, then disappear. Why should we believe you? James met his gaze, unfazed by the skepticism. You shouldn't. Not yet. Trust's earned, not given. So let's start here. I'm not leaving until this place runs the way it's supposed to. Ethan studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly, as if testing the weight of James's words. Ryan, still pale from the confrontation with Stephen, cleared his throat. Okay, boss. What do we do now? First, we survive the dinner rush, James said. Then we fix what's broken, one step at a time. He jumped into the fray, taking orders at the counter alongside Ryan. His hands moved clumsily at first, fumbling with the register's touchscreen, but muscle memory from his teenage years kicked in. He called out orders, poured drinks, and even bagged fries, all while keeping an eye on Sarah and Ethan. Sarah worked the fryer with a new steadiness, her shoulders less hunched. Ethan, though still exhausted, cracked a small grin when James handed him a soda during a brief lull. Drink, James said. You're no good to anyone dehydrated. Thanks, Ethan muttered, taking a sip. Didn't think the CEO would care about that. I care about my people, James said simply. Always have. As the rush continued, James saw the toll that they had taken. Sarah's apron was stained with grease, her ponytail fraying. Ethan's movements were sluggish, his eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. Ryan, trying to keep up, snapped at a customer before catching himself and apologizing. The restaurant was a machine running on fumes, and James knew he couldn't fix it in one shift. But he could start. He pulled out his phone and called Claire, his assistant. Claire, I need backup at Oakwood. Pull staff from the downtown and Lincoln Park locations. At least 4 people, as soon as possible. And get maintenance out here tomorrow to fix the fryer and ventilation. On it, Claire said, her voice brisk. You're really in the trenches, huh? Deeper than I thought, James said, glancing at Sarah, who was wiping sweat from her brow. Make it quick. Within an hour, 4 employees arrived. From other locations, their sunshine burgers polished crisp and their energy a stark contrast to the Oakwood crew. The change was immediate. Orders moved faster, the line shortened, and the kitchen's frenetic pace eased. Sarah exhaled, leaning against the counter. I forgot what it feels like to breathe, she said, almost to herself. James smiled. This is how it should be. You're not robots. But not everyone was convinced. Ethan, wiping down the grill, muttered, This is nice, but what happens tomorrow? Steven's gone, but the schedule's still a mess. And Michael's gonna flip when he hears about this. James's jaw tightened at the mention of Michael Hayes, the district director who'd fed him lies about the company's health. Michael's my problem, he said. Your job is to keep this place running tonight. Can you do that? Ethan nodded, his expression still guarded. Yeah, for now. As the shift continued, James noticed a shift in the customers too. Linda Harris, the regular who clapped earlier, approached the counter with a cautious smile. I don't know what you did, she said to James, but this is the first time in months my order was right and fast. Keep it up, James nodded, gratitude warming his chest. We will, Linda. Thanks for sticking with us. As the dinner rush wound down, the kitchen settled into a manageable rhythm. The extra staff made all the difference. Orders were filled. On time, the counter was clean, and the fryer no longer threatened to break down with every batch. James took a moment to gather Sarah, Ethan, and Ryan in the break room, a cramped space with a wobbly table and a flickering vending machine. It was the first time all day the three had sat down together. I owe you an apology, James said, leaning against the wall. I let this place slide. I trusted the wrong people to run it, and you paid the price. That stops now. Sarah twisted her hands in her lap, her voice quiet. It's been so hard. Stephen was always honest about mistakes, but we never had enough people or time. I'm saving for college, and I can't afford to lose this job. But sometimes I just want to quit. James nodded, his heart heavy. You shouldn't have to feel that way. What do you need to make this job work for you? Sarah hesitated, then said, More help, I guess? And not being scared I'll get fired for dropping a tray. Done, James said. No one's getting fired for honest mistakes. And we're hiring more staff, starting this week. Ethan crossed his arms, his skepticism sharp. That sounds great, but Stephen said the same stuff when he started. Then he cut hours to save money. How do we know you're not just here for a day? James met his gaze. You don't, but I'm not Stephen. I'm staying until this place is right. And if things slip, you call me directly. He slid a business card across the table, his personal number scrawled on it. No middlemen. Ethan took the card, his expression softening slightly. All right, we'll see. Ryan, who'd been quiet, spoke up, his voice heavy with guilt. I messed up too. Stephen pushed me to keep costs low, so I leaned on Sarah and Ethan harder than I should have. I didn't know what else to do. James studied him. Ryan wasn't cruel, just caught in a broken system. You're still here, Ryan. That means you get a chance to do better. Help me fix this, and we'll rebuild together. Ryan nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. I'm in. The conversation was cut short by a shout from the counter, a late customer demanding a manager. James followed Ryan out, but his mind was on Ethan's words. Promises weren't enough. He needed to show results, and fast. But he also knew the problems didn't end with Stephen. Michael Hayes, the district director, had overseen this location and others, feeding James lies about their performance. Tomorrow, James would confront him, but tonight, He had to keep this restaurant afloat. As the shift ended, the new staff cleaned up, and the Oakwood crew looked tired but not broken. Sarah smiled faintly as she clocked out, a rare sight. Ethan lingered, watching James wipe down the counter. "You're really staying?" he asked. "Until it's right," James said, meeting his eyes. Ethan nodded, a grudging respect in his gaze. "Guess we'll hold you to that." James stepped outside into the cool night air, the neon Sunshine Burger sign flickering above. The restaurant was far from fixed, but it was a start. His phone buzzed a text from Claire. Michael heard about Stephen. "He's not happy. Wants to meet tomorrow." James's jaw tightened. Michael had answers to give, and James wasn't in the mood for more excuses. As he drove back to his Chicago apartment, the weight of the day settled over him. He'd seen the truth, and it was uglier than he'd imagined. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was leading again, not from a corner office, but from the front lines. Tomorrow, he'd face Michael in the bigger battle ahead. For now, he'd earned a small victory. The Oakwood staff had made it through a shift without breaking. It wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. James Carter woke before dawn, the Chicago skyline a faint silhouette against the gray morning. His apartment was silent, save for the soft hum of the coffee maker. Last night's shift at the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers still clung to him. The grease on his hands, the exhaustion in Sarah Thompson's eyes, the defiance in Ethan Miller's voice. He'd made progress, bringing in extra staff and ousting Stephen Brooks, but the victory felt fleeting. The real battle loomed today, confronting Michael Hayes, the district director who'd let the company rot under his watch. James sipped his coffee, steeling himself. Michael wasn't just a manager. He was a symbol of everything James had failed to notice. By 8 a.m., James was in his corner office, the stack of customer complaints now organized into a damning dossier. His assistant, Claire, had compiled reports from all 6 Midwest locations: understaffing, equipment failures, and plummeting morale. The Oakwood restaurant wasn't an outlier. It was a symptom. James's phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Michael's here. Looks confident. Good luck." James's jaw tightened. Confidence wouldn't save Michael today. Michael Hayes strode into the conference room at 8:30, his tailored suit crisp and his smile practiced. He was 50, with silver streaks in his hair and the charm of a seasoned politician. "James," he said, extending a hand. "Heard you made quite a splash at Oakwood. Wish you'd given me a heads up." James didn't take the hand, gesturing to a chair instead. "Sit, Michael. We need to talk." Michael's smile faltered, but he sat, leaning back with an air of ease. "Sure thing. So, what's this about? Stephen's exit?" "I'll admit, he could be heavy-handed, but he kept costs down." James slid the dossier across the table. Costs down at what price? A 16-year-old working 9 hours without a break. Sarah Thompson berated for a broken fryer you wouldn't fix. Customers walking out because we're running restaurants on skeleton crews. You told me everything was fine. It's not. Michael's eyes flicked to the dossier, his confidence cracking. "Look, James, fast food's tough. You know that. We're hitting our profit targets, and yeah, things get rough sometimes, but that's the business. Kids like Ethan exaggerate. They complain about hard work, but they'll learn." James's fingers curled against the table. "Hard work? You're breaking labor laws, Michael. Threatening teenagers with lost hours if they take a break isn't management. It's exploitation. You let Stephen turn Oakwood into a sweatshop, and it's not just Oakwood. Every location's falling apart." Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You wanted growth, James. I delivered. Labor costs were eating us alive, so I made tough calls. You can't run a charity and a business." "That's the last time you say that," James said, his voice ice. "This isn't about charity. It's about not grinding our people into the ground. You knew what was happening. and you lied to me. Repeatedly, Michael sighed, shaking his head. All right, I'll talk to the managers, make some tweaks. No need to overreact. James stood, his gaze unyielding. You're done, Michael. Fired, effective immediately. Michael blinked, his face draining of color. You're kidding. I've been with you 8 years. I know this company inside out. And you broke it, James said. You built a culture of fear and cut corners that hurt our people and our customers. I'm cleaning up your mess, starting with you. Michael pushed back from the table, his charm gone. You'll regret this, James. Fire me, and you'll have a revolt on your hands. Half the managers report to me, they won't. Take kindly to this. Then they're welcome to leave, James said. Get out. Michael stood, his jaw tight, and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. James exhaled, the weight of the moment settling over him. Firing Michael was necessary, but it was only the beginning. The company's problems ran deeper than one man, and fixing them would mean dismantling a system Michael had built. By noon, James called a company-wide meeting, gathering every district manager and supervisor in the Chicago office. The conference room was packed, the air thick with unease. Whispers about Stephen and Michael's exits had spread, and the managers eyed James warily, sensing a shift. He stood at the front, his presence commanding but not aloof. I went undercover at Oakwood yesterday, James said, his voice clear. I worked a full shift, saw what our employees endure. Understaffed shifts, broken equipment. Managers threatening kids with lost hours if they take a break. This isn't one bad location, it's systemic, and it ends today. The room was silent, managers exchanging glances. A middle-aged woman, Corinne, spoke up hesitantly. Sir, we were told to keep labor costs low. That's what Michael wanted. Michael's gone, James said. And so is that mindset. Effective immediately, every location will be fully staffed. Breaks are mandatory. No one's punished for taking them. If I hear of a manager denying a break or using hours as leverage, they're fired on the spot. Murmurs rippled through the room. A younger manager, Tom, raised a hand. With respect, Mr. Carter, this sounds good, but it's expensive. Hiring more people, fixing equipment, it'll hit profits hard. James nodded, expecting the pushback. It's an investment, not a loss. Burnout employees mean high turnover, bad service, and angry customers. We take care of our people. They'll take care of the business. Anyone disagree? No one spoke, but James saw doubt in their faces. Change wouldn't come easily, not with managers loyal to Michael's cost-cutting gospel. He knew some would resist, maybe even sabotage the reforms. But he wasn't backing down. After the meeting, James met with the board of directors, a tougher crowd. They grilled him on the financials, hiring initiatives, equipment upgrades, and oversight systems. Would cost millions. You're betting big, James, the board chair said. If this doesn't pay off, profits tank, and we're all in trouble. It'll pay off, James said, his conviction unwavering. We're not just fixing restaurants, we're rebuilding trust. That's worth more than a quarter's earnings. The board approved the plan, but with a warning: deliver results or face consequences. James left the meeting drained but resolute. He called Claire to launch the reforms. New hiring drives, anonymous employee reporting systems, and unannounced supervisor visits to ensure compliance. Maintenance crews were dispatched to fix equipment across all locations. Starting with Oakwood's faulty fryer. As evening fell, James's phone buzzed with an email from Linda Harris. The Oakwood regular went back today. Night and day difference. Staff smiled, food was hot, and the place felt alive again. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. James smiled, the words a small balm against the day's battles. But another email caught his eye, an anonymous tip from a manager. Some of Michael's old crew are talking. They're not happy about the changes. Watch your back. James leaned back in his chair, the Chicago skyline now twinkling against the night. Michael's influence lingered, a shadow over the reforms. Some managers, wedded to the old ways, were already pushing back, delaying hires or spreading rumors that James was bankrupting the company. The fight wasn't over. It was just changing shape. He thought of Sarah, Ethan, and Ryan, the faces of the people he was fighting for. They deserved better than a company that chewed them up and spit them out. James picked up his phone, texting Claire. Schedule visits to the other 5 locations. I'm not done yet. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a leader, and he'd see this through, no matter the cost. 3 weeks later, James Carter stepped into the Oakwood Sunshine Burgers, the familiar hum of the kitchen greeting him. The air no longer carried the sour tang of neglect. The floors gleamed, the fryer hummed steadily, and the ventilation system purred, clearing the haze of grease. The dining area buzzed with customers, their chatter punctuated by laughter, a stark contrast to the tense silence of his first day undercover. James wore his usual jeans and polo, no longer hiding as Jimmy Larson, but he felt more at home here than in his Chicago office. This was where the real work happened. The changes were undeniable. The staff had doubled, with new hires bustling alongside Sarah Thompson, Ethan Miller, and Ryan Bennett. Sarah moved with confidence at the fryer, her ponytail neat, her smile genuine as she handed a customer a bag of fries. Ethan, now on a schedule that let him attend school, worked the grill with energy, joking with a coworker about a basketball game. Ryan, recently promoted to store manager after Steven's exit, oversaw the counter with a calm authority, no longer snapping under pressure. The restaurant wasn't perfect. Orders still got hectic during rushes, but it felt alive, human. Like the Sunshine Burgers James had envisioned 8 years ago. James caught Ethan's eye as he approached the counter. Not bad, huh? James said, gesturing to the bustling kitchen. Ethan grinned, a far cry from the skeptical kid who challenged him weeks ago. Yeah, it's different. I actually ate lunch today. First time in months. Good, James said. That's the standard now. Sarah joined them, wiping her hands on her apron. Mr. Carter, it's weirdly nice here now. Like, I don't dread coming to work anymore. Thanks for, following through. James nodded, warmth spreading through him. You deserve it, Sarah. If things slip, you've got my number. Ryan approached, his expression a mix of pride and caution. Team's doing better, sir. Morale's up, turnover's down. Even got a few 5-star reviews online. But he hesitated, glancing at the others. Spit it out, James said, sensing the weight behind Ryan's pause. There's talk, Ryan said. A new chain, Burger Blitz, is opening a block away. They're advertising hard, cheap deals, flashy signs. Some customers are already talking about switching. James's stomach tightened. He'd heard whispers of Burger Blitz, a national chain with deep pockets. Sources told him they'd hired Michael Hayes, his former district director, who likely shared internal data to give them an edge. This wasn't just competition. It was a direct challenge to everything James was rebuilding. We'll handle it, James said, his voice steady. They can't match what we're doing here, not if we keep our people first. Ethan crossed his arms, a flicker of his old skepticism returning. You really think we can hold up? Big chains like that. They don't mess around. James met his gaze. Neither do I. They can throw money at customers, but we've got something they don't trust. You, Sarah, Ryan, you're why this place works now. Keep that, and we'll be fine. Sarah nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. I'm in. This place feels like ours now. As James stepped outside, Linda Harris, the regular who'd witnessed his reveal, waved from a table. Best burger I've had here in years, she called. "Told my book club to come by this weekend." "Thanks, Linda," James said, smiling. Her loyalty was a reminder of what was at stake, not just profits, but a community, standing under the neon sunshine. Burger sign. James took in the restaurant's new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Ethan's laughter, Sarah's confidence, Ryan's leadership, they were proof that change was possible. But the shadow of Burger Blitz loomed, and James knew the fight he wasn't going to let his company slide back into the failures he'd uncovered. This wasn't just about fixing a restaurant. It was about building a legacy that lasted. This story of Sunshine Burgers is more than a tale of corporate reform. It's a testament to the power of empathy and accountability. James Carter's journey shows that leadership isn't about titles or profits. It's about seeing people, not just numbers. By stepping into the shoes of his employees, James uncovered the human cost of a broken system, teenagers like Ethan and Sarah, burdened by exploitation, and managers like Ryan, trapped by impossible demands. His willingness to listen, act, and stay accountable transformed a toxic workplace into one where people could thrive. The story reminds us that change starts with courage. The courage to face hard truths, to stand up for what's right, and to value every person's dignity, no matter their role. The lessons are clear. For leaders, it's a call to stay connected to the front lines, to question polished reports, and to prioritize people over short-term gains. For workers, it's a reminder that their voices matter, even when the system feels stacked against them. And for all of us, it's a challenge to build workplaces and communities where fairness and respect aren't just ideals, but realities. Sunshine Burger's story isn't over, just as our own efforts to create better systems never truly end. It's a journey worth taking. If this story of courage, accountability, and transformation moved you, there's more where it came from. Legacy Stories brings you tales of real people facing real challenges, finding strength, and leaving a mark. Subscribe to our channel at Legacy Stories on YouTube, or follow us on social media to catch the next chapter, whether it's another workplace revolution or a personal triumph. Share your thoughts, share the story, and join us in celebrating the legacies that shape our world. Let's keep the conversation going.